brother. What you gonna do, brother? Oh, yeah. Are you ready? Hey, yo. And that's the bottom line. Shut that control into a nosedive. Woo!
Well, all I can say is someone's been eating their vitamins and saying their prayers.
Life sucks, and then you die.
Strategy, my Oklahoma ass.
You're next. What? Oh, that's the Goldberg taking it out. Goldberg just feared the rock.
That's cheap, plain and simple.
Rest in peace.
Welcome to the JM Report. I'm your host, GoodOlJM, coming to you from JM Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. On this Mother's Day weekend, 2020 edition. So happy Mother's Day to past, present, and future moms. Despite the craziness that I keep calling it, happening around the world, I'm hoping that everyone, at least those who are able to, come together with family and friends safely as possible and celebrate in some fashion, in some shape or form, besides going through everything together, basically worldwide. It really shouldn't stop any kind of celebration, and I've stressed it here a couple of times. If it's anniversary or birthday or any kind of special occasion like that that's coming up, don't stop or do not think of not celebrating because of what's happening. And, you know, find ways to distract yourself and still have a good time. With that said, I do realize many, and I mean many, my goodness, lives that have been lost, and loved ones and friends that were taken from this craziness are not here to help you celebrate. And I kind of understand how much the mood can change because of it. But I would, if anyone asks me, and I know they don't really, but what would you do? I would say try. I know Yoda would say something different, like there is no try. It's either you do or you don't. But that's up to the individual. Emotions riding high. We hear about the same thing every day, but it's always different words being used as far as where we stand and how much longer, or is normal ever going to be normal again? Personally, no, there's going to be a new normal, whatever that is. And whenever all this blows over, who knows? I mean, I don't think there's a countdown of any kind. But in short, before I babble on too long on this wrestling review show, hope everyone's all right. Hope everyone's doing okay. Practicing social distancing, practicing good hygiene, washing your hands, staying at home if you need be. And yeah, if you get a chance, just like our brave men and women who serve in the military, if you ever run into a doctor or a nurse, more than likely from social distancing, you know, say thank you. Offer and present some kind of appreciation. This past week was National Nurse Celebrating Day or Nurse Day, but it was acknowledging, obviously, nurses worldwide, doctors worldwide. I used to know actually a few people in the medical field. You know, unfortunately, life happens and people go their separate directions. But if they're still in the same field, I'm pretty sure they were tied up in all this. And if they're listening, I wish them well. Well, as far as what I've been up to, besides practicing the stay-at-home order, which is kind of not really still in effect, at least not in my neck of the woods. Depends who you ask anyway. But for me, it's been nearly 2.5 months that not so much going out. I do that maybe once a week when I need to for shopping and get food for my dogs who can't feed themselves. And I remember bragging about, in so many words, I was able to land a position with Cox Media Group back in October of 2019. Unfortunately, even though things picked up so slightly, I mean, the needle on that meter barely showed a blip as far as things getting better, where people can go back can go back to the offices and begin working from there again. Not really. Uh, we had a meeting earlier in the week, and not much has changed other than the returning date being pushed forward yet again. So, what am I gonna do as far as any kind of income for me goes? Well, I was very fortunate that shortly after, I want to say after New Year's of 2020, um, don't want to mention where exactly for now, but I went out to this warehouse that's not too far from me, and it's not open for the public, but I was able to find it on Google Maps, and I walk in and happen to come across the owner, and asked, "Hey, are you guys hiring by any chance?" And he said no, but I did leave my name and number, and hopes to hear from him. It didn't really work out, at least for the next, I would say, 4.5 months, maybe a little bit more. Just throw in a few more days in there. So this past Monday, to my surprise, I was just killing time shortly after lunch, and I'm watching a bunch of YouTube videos. My phone rings, and it was a number I didn't recognize, so I didn't answer it. And thankfully, the person calling left a voicemail. And that's where I literally only ended up listening to half the message, because he ended up saying what I needed to hear. So it was the same warehouse that I went to. They called me back. So the owner ended up passing along my information to his son, who also works at the warehouse, and offered me a job. So of course, in wanting to be honest, I said, well, I do have a job elsewhere. I'm not working now, unfortunately, and I had to explain exactly what I do with the other job, and that it's going to take a long time before I get back to any kind of promotions or attending any kind of events, as far as handing out any goodies or merchandise or whatnot you want to call it at a hockey game or a football game or anywhere like that. It's going to be a really long time. And my understanding is a lot of those parties that would be in contact with the station, they've canceled pretty much the rest of the events for the majority of the remaining year. And even then, they might cancel even more. So, in short, I didn't want to wait that long. So, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but then came that phone call. And I gave him the heads up if I could speak to my other employer. I'm saying other employer as if I would have got accepted and gave me that job on the spot, because I had to be honest with my first employer too. I was like, hey, I have an opportunity here, and it could still work out where I am keeping both jobs. The warehouse gig is from Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and I can have nights and weekends off, and that's when I can devote my time with the other job. So everybody's happy, more or less. So I called my first boss, and it was already past 5, so the warehouse was just closing up. So I called back Tuesday morning, and I explained, yeah, he said everything's good, I'm good to go, and I can start as soon as possible. And what was funny is he was, yeah, he well, I accepted a job, and he was offering, okay, well, how soon can you start? I'm like, well, I can be there in the hour, within the hour, because I'm about 15 minutes away from you. And it's almost like, as if he hesitated, like, oh, well, that soon, huh? Oh, I mean, you can start tomorrow, which would have been Wednesday. And I'm thinking, like, no, screw that. I mean, I could work now. I have nothing else to do. What am I gonna do? So it's like, okay, how about you come in around 11ish? You start then, get you settled and go from there. And pretty much ever since then I've been doing the warehouse gig, and I like it. Was able to find ways to help me pass the time, and that they at least allow everyone, employees, to listen to music, off their phones or iPods or whatnot. And we do practice social distancing. There's maybe just under a dozen people working throughout the whole building, so plenty of space, plenty of opportunities for that social distancing. And yeah, I was very fortunate, and I'm not saying this to brag to everyone listening. It's just got a phone call from a company that I thought have long forgotten about me, and to my surprise, called me up. So I got that going on. And with that said, I normally drop my shows on Fridays, and I really, really was trying to get this show a day sooner. But I was just so exhausted physically, especially now getting used to yet this other schedule. And obviously I'm not used to it. So maybe hopefully within another week or so. But if push comes to shove, I just may have to change my scheduled release dates on my report show and move it up to Saturdays instead. But we'll see, one day at a time. We'll see how it goes. But I felt like I wanted to share that story with everyone. But for those who have unfortunately lost their jobs and whatever the hell's going on with the unemployment system, I mean, personally, I think it's unreliable at this point. And it's funny how so many people are pointing out the fact that how many times in a month do you get that notification that on your phone that either your Facebook app or your Instagram, Twitter app or whatnot has a new update? Just push here, press there, or whatever. But this website that's been around for how long now supposedly has not bugs, but it just hasn't been updated at all. And it keeps crashing. Granted, tens of thousands of people try to log in at the same time. That'll probably cause a crash just about anywhere. But the amount of volume that on a daily basis we'll receive, even now when people try to log in and they go as far as the welcome page and that's it. We're in the year 2020 and there's no one keeping maintenance on this one particular federal website that has to deal with the people's money. All I can say is keep trying, folks. If I can make one suggestion, it would be if you're going to try to find another job, that may not be exactly what you used to do before all this craziness took place, or whatever you were doing before you got laid off or terminated, chances are you may not get the exact same position or the exact same title. But if all possible, try to find anything that does not directly deal with the public. And most of those jobs include retail. And I believe that's one of the I mean, it's on a short end of the list, but one of the reasons why I was so fortunate to get the call that I did earlier in the week. And I don't deal with the public at all. My other job does, but yeah, it's shorter amount of time and hours there, and do it again the next day. But all of that has to be straightened and smoothed out eventually as time goes on, and we'll see when and where everything fits. But enough about me. About to get into some wrestling news, and again, I only picked out the stories that caught my attention and feel that it's worthy of mentioning. Not too many stories involving numbers and details like that, like firings or stock market or whatever companies' quarters look like. So let's jump right into it. So, according to What Culture, Kevin Owens may not be as injured as seriously first thought and could possibly return in the next few weeks. It was noted before, well, before this motorcycle drove by, but it was noted before that he injured his ankle during his WrestleMania match with Seth Rollins. He needed to have examinations, X-rays, and possibly MRI done. Nothing came out of that front, and it's possibly between What Culture and Dave Meltzer reporting that the injury may not be as seriously as first thought. So it could be as bad as a ankle sprain that's keeping Kevin Owens out of action, and no surgery required, obviously. So once word got back to the higher ups in WWE, according to reports, Kevin Owens is choosing to stay off television. This way he can spend more time with his family, especially living up in Canada. I don't know what the situation is up there as far as what practices they're going through, but he has declined to appear or attend any upcoming WWE TV tapings. And again, wants to spend the time with the family. And you know what? I don't blame him. I think he's in a good place as far as his position in WWE. He gave a hell of a performance for WrestleMania, regardless of the injury. He may or may not have thought of having the time off and be written off TV. Hence why Seth Rollins out of nowhere got a title shot for tomorrow night, matter of fact, Money in the Bank. But you know what? It is what it is. And I'll get into the whole Roman Reigns issue a little bit later. But, you know, good for Owens. He's not as injured, seriously, and hopefully he can be back, say, for SummerSlam. Speaking of which, there's supposed to be a scheduled pay-per-view for next month. And right now it's still to be announced, to be determined. And I believe it's supposed to take place in San Diego, if I'm not mistaken. California government, or the governor, has already announced weeks ago that for the next full year, there aren't going to be any large crowds or large gatherings for sporting events for a full year, and that included WrestleMania 37. So, regardless of the cancellation, they still have their Performance Center as a backup plan. I seriously doubted that they were going to even have a pay-per-view in California or even in another disclosed location But according to CBSSports.com, the May 10th, which is obviously tomorrow night, Money in the Bank, June is to be announced. And I stand corrected. It's for the July 19th pay-per-view to take place in San Jose, which would be Extreme Rules. And you can look it up. It's been updated, I'll say about a week or so ago, this list on CBSSports.com. And with the exception of TakeOver Boston and SummerSlam, that still have it under the to be determined category, more than likely, if things keep going the way they are, it's going to take place at the Performance Center. SummerSlam can easily be another one of those two-night events, which would not surprise me. Money in the Bank will be the first pay-per-view under these new rules and guidelines and have the entire show in one night, whether it's pre-taped or not. And then you got War Games 4 and Survivor Series for that weekend in November. And every other pay-per-view has a to-be-announced name from September to the end of the year. So I guess the focus is only on the 5 main pay-per-views. We're now actually back to 4. Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. Those are the 4 main pay-per-views that they focus on every year. And it would absolutely suck because SummerSlam was supposed to be the plan B for the Hall of Fame ceremony. Now, can you still go through with it and have these Hall of Fame inductees that were announced early in the year and have whomever was going to induct them and whomever were going to accept on their behalf if they cannot physically be there to accept? Can you still have it at the Performance Center? I mean, if that's the case, looking at it from a perspective of, okay, well, how does this fall into play with the guidelines that are in for social distancing? It will definitely have more people than expected, besides the talent and the ring crew and the camera crew and other on-air talent, such as referees and announcers, backstage agents, and whomever runs or will be part of the gorilla position. That's a lot of people now. Adding the family and friends of whoever would have been invited or be a part of the Hall of Fame ceremony at originally at Amalie Arena in Tampa. Are they all going to be invited, or will they all pack up the Performance Center and have the presentations in the ring or on stage? Well, if it's in the ring, I seriously doubt they're not going to be worried about anyone running in and jump Bret Hart again. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how they will still move forward with it. These pay-per-views, don't kid yourself. These pay-per-views will happen one way or another for WWE. And their ultimate backup plan is that Performance Center. I'll go as far and say maybe even Full Sail University. If you want to split up the crew and have half an event at the PC and the other at Full Sail. But I'm sure they'll find a way. I don't think they can, or they will want to, push back the Hall of Fame any more than they need to. It sucks that it was taken away to begin with, under understandable reasons and situations, but you know what? I throw it at you guys. If you got any ideas or suggestions, put them down in the comments and tag WWE. Hey, how about you run the Hall of Fame 2020 in this manner? Moving along. AEW. They got into a little bit of trouble. They got fined by the Maryland State Athletic Commission. At first, I had to do a double take. Like, wait, what? And especially for the reasons why they were fined. I'm like, okay, well, I guess Maryland will be one less state to perform in. So here's what happened. AEW advertised the Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega in a non-sanctioned match during Full Gear, but it had issues with the actual sanctioning side of things. And the actual filing, the actual paperwork was uploaded to Twitter by Christopher Cruz, and you can go check it out yourself. It's still up there at Crispy Cruiser for the few oh my goodness, for the full viewing of the filing. There's a tongue twister. And part of it says, during a match between licensed wrestlers Jonathan Good and Tyson Smith, aka Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega, both Mr. Good and Mr. Smith suffered lacerations, which caused blood to be introduced into the ring. Upon review of the matter, the commission determined that administrative charges against the respondent were appropriate for alleged violation of the Maryland law pertaining to wrestling contests and related regulations. So, due to the blood, each violator, Moxley and Omega, will fined $5,000 each, meaning that AEW has within the next 30 days to pay the full 10 grand. It's also noticed that the commission acknowledges that AEW took precautions to reduce the potential for injury to both competitors by using materials to simulate injury and merely give the appearance of bleeding. Blood was still introduced in the ring and in other instances during the match through deliberate and repeated actions by the two wrestlers, as scripted by AEW. So, in other words, according to the State Athletic Commission out of Maryland, blood is a no-no, at least when it comes to pro wrestling, because the cat's out of the bag. Well, it's been out of the bag for years now, how pro wrestling is predetermined. I hope everyone's still avoiding using the F word in this case. So, it sounded like more as a suggestion, or we're better off from the athletic commission's point of view for wrestling matches not to have any blood of any kind, whether it's intentional or hard way. And accidents do happen. They can happen. Sometimes you mistime a headbutt or one of your worked punches, kicks. If you do use props, just as like a steel chair or table or ladder, the railings, what have you, accidents do happen. But I'm sure they will want to keep a good working relationship between the Maryland Athletic Commission and that AEW can return in the near future. I just hope it wasn't something petty. And regardless, again, if it was hard way or accidental or scripted, like $5 grand because you got cut, kind of stiff, isn't it? But I guess it is what it is. And I never worked with a state athletic commission, so I wouldn't know how much stiffer the fines would have been had it been something more serious of an injury. But I guess accidents can't happen either. And speaking of combat sports, sports analysis Luke Thomas says that Cain Velasquez's coach is going to stick to pro wrestling and will not return to UFC or any other MMA company to pursue that career. Velasquez, who was recently cut by WWE after signing a 3-year deal and only made, well, on television 2 appearances, and I failed to mention the last time that he did have a in-ring tag team match teaming up with Rey Mysterio in Mexico City. But that doesn't change anything, and doesn't change the facts that Vasquez Cain Velasquez was only in WWE for less than a cup of coffee. Hell, maybe whatever size are those little cream cups. Less than that. So he's released. Still wants to give it a go in pro wrestling. The man is pushing. The man is pushing 40. Now, I'm not saying that he's too old to do either sport, but he's very competitive. He has a proven track record that that he is a badass. He can mix it up with the best of them. One of the very few people that can claim that he beat the crap out of Brock Lesnar. So I think that's a hell of a resume to show off. But wherever he lands, hopefully they'll give him the opportunity and improve in his in-ring skills. I know he has a bum knee, hence he wearing the knee brace on the SmackDown debut on Fox, and then just a few days later in Super Showdown, in his one and only title match in WWE, where he lost to Brock Lesnar in less than 2 minutes. Hopefully there's more of Cain Velasquez that we can see in the ring that we couldn't get a chance to see now in WWE. And how is this for a small world? This week we saw, well, we've been seeing her, but it's only been acknowledged recently, and specifically that the female referee that we saw on NXT ends up being the first ever female African-American referee in the history of WWE, but technically in NXT as well. Aja Smith, she ended up officiating a match between the debuting, well, not the former Killer Cross. Carry On, is that's his name? Not Carry On. Yeah, Carry On. Keep it moving. Get out of here, Carry On. Carry On Cross. I'm butchering that name. I'm sorry, because I'm so used to calling him Killer Cross. But regardless, Cross and Scarlett debuted on NXT, and his opponent was Leon Ruff, who is the boyfriend of the referee. If that makes sense. I'm sure if you didn't have a visual or didn't realize that I mentioned that the referee was a female, probably would have had a different perspective on that. But it's 2020. No one should be judging anyway. But how peculiar and interesting is that? In this case, Aja Smith is refereeing her boyfriend's match against the debuting Killer Cross and Scarlett, who beats the crap out of him in less than a minute. She'll go on Twitter and say, if you had told me a year ago I'll be refereeing, let alone refereeing my boyfriend's match on TV, I would have never believed it. Life is so cool. Leon Ruff, you're always a winner to me. And Miss Smith tweeted this out earlier in the week, and it was just touching, I guess, is a way to put it. And couldn't imagine the conversation they had in the back after the match was over. And if you haven't seen this week's NXT and a debuting of Killer Cross, and I'm calling him by Killer Cross for now until I'm able to properly pronounce his new name. But the conversation between Leon Ruff and Aja Smith definitely would have been interesting backstage after the match. And to see, I guess, I'm not sure if they live together, but I would assume Ruff would have invited her to dinner and say, hey, let's celebrate. Got to share TV time in the ring together. Not too many couples can say that, especially in pro wrestling. I mean, it's one thing to be a couple and you're married to a wrestler and you're managing him or her. That's one thing, but to literally be in the ring at the same time, and it's not a mixed tag team match or anything like that, or a multi-person match in the ring. It's something to brag about for a bit. My girlfriend refereed my match. Keeping it kayfabe somewhat. Yeah, that's not at all a disadvantage. Not at all. But speaking of the crosses, well, Killer Cross and Scarlett finally debuting on NXT. Scarlett actually signed with WWE back in November of last year. and possibly the plan was to wait for Killer Cross to sign with WWE, and he would eventually early in the year, and waited till now, about 5 months later, to debut on television, and already has a upcoming feud with Tommaso Ciampa, which he is expected to return next week on NXT after being attacked by Cross backstage. But they're the talk of the town, so to speak, because during their debut and their entrances, wow, is all I can say about their entrance on stage, on the ramp, and especially in the ring. So for those who haven't seen or heard it, I mean, you gotta check it out. It's on YouTube, it's on social media, WWE, all over the place. What an entrance. Scarlett will go later on Twitter and confirm that indeed she is the one singing the theme song for Killer Cross. I'm pretty sure it's going to be called Fall and Pray. Has been updated or uploaded, I should say, to WWE's music YouTube channel yet. But it sounds very rock and rollish, very eerie at times. But the visual itself, and a lot of people, including myself, would compare this to the debut of The Fiend with his hurt and heel entrance less than a year ago at SummerSlam against Finn Balor, of how epic it looked, especially on television. And I'm sure it made the fans watching from home when it was over chanting "Holy shit!" But too bad there wasn't a live crowd to do that. So you got Scarlett standing on stage, her back towards the camera, the video wall, the Titantron, if you will, has an eerie background with that looked like, I couldn't tell, but it was definitely a bird flapping around in the middle. And from a certain point, from a certain angle, right down the middle of the ramp, the camera angle just caught it just right. If you just missed when the Titantron basically faded in, and you see this eagle or hawk or whatever that was, when it changed angles, it looked as if it was Scarlett, the one with the wings, and that was an amazing angle, an amazing catch there. So I give credit to the camera crew. Then out walks Killer Cross, who stands behind her, well, technically in front of her. Cross is facing the ring. Here comes Scarlett, and then she just starts lip syncing to the theme song. Basically, not yelling because she's lip syncing, but basically saying "Fall and Pray," and that the end is near, the end is coming, the end is here. Somebody really had a heart out for the old Armageddon theme song back in the day, and it's here resurrected for Killer Cross. And she, well, lip synced all the way into the ring. Here comes Killer Cross, and they both stand in the middle, and the ring is full of smoke. It's like all misty, all smoky, and with the lighting effect flashing between yellow and red and orange, almost as if the place was on fire. And going along with the beat of the music, it looked amazing. My words can't do it justice. You just have to see this for yourselves. And it gave such an impression to Killer Cross, not to mention the backing and the support of Triple H. It looks like they have a lot of plans for this guy. I'm not saying, make him champion like tomorrow, but there are plans. Triple H is very fond of him, long before he even signed with WWE. And having an amazing entrance like this, he'll definitely be the talk of the town for quite some time. And assuming where he'll be positioned, say, by the end of the year, whenever the next takeover show will take place. And the last one of the year is supposed to be for Survivor Series weekend. Maybe by then he'll make a bigger impression and have something in the works. I wouldn't put him up for the NXT heavyweight title right away, currently held by Adam Cole. But Killer Cross, if no one's seen him, I mean, he's a big dude. He's a big dude, and he could definitely give someone like Keith Lee a run for his money assuming he's still champion by the end of the year, and go after that North American title. But that's just me fantasy booking, not because he has a killer, no pun intended, but have an amazing entrance theme song and an amazing entrance setup with the lighting and the smoke and the lip syncing and all that. More than Triple H, I would assume that they have a good eye and plans for this guy moving forward. So, see what happens. This week in the New York Post, they caught up with Michelle McCool, who was the wife of the Undertaker. They discussed the Undertaker's career, about the streak being broken, and so much more. It's a good read. If you want to head over to the New York Post website, you can read the entire article on your own. But just a quick tidbit about what was discussed. They asked Mrs. Undertaker, I guess. They asked if the Undertaker himself has seen the Boneyard match yet, and surprisingly said he has not watched the Boneyard match. Interesting. I mean, he was there, so I guess the idea is, well, I was part of it. Why do I need to see it? Well, it was cinematically recorded to video in digital, so I would imagine you will want to see which cuts were specifically used, which takes were edited in, and it was still one of the greatest matches in recent memory as far as WWE goes. Technically, it wasn't a match, but how it all came together and the thought process and the effort deserves a lot of praise. And she was also asked if she knew about the streak being broken ahead of time. Michelle McCool would say that she did not know until late that same afternoon it was going to happen, saying, I couldn't believe it. I don't think it needed to happen, but Mark was fine with it. People don't understand. He's going to do business. He understands that business is business, and that's true. As Vince McMahon one time described Shawn Michaels, like, "Whoa, Shawn is a good soldier," referencing after the Montreal Screwjob incident. At that point in time, he was in the company a tad longer than the Undertaker. And you know what? I would assume that Vince McMahon will describe Undertaker the same way. Well, maybe as a great soldier, Undertaker is. But yeah, business is business, and we've heard through many sources, including Paul Heyman, Stone Cold, even when interviewing Vince, the one and only time he was on the Stone Cold podcast, a few weeks after it happened at WrestleMania 30. And then Austin again would ask Taker on the Broken Skull sessions. And yeah, everything was agreed upon. It was Vince's idea, regardless of the reasons. Many believe because to give Lesnar at the time that big monster push, only to have, in my opinion, one of the worst title runs ever, when this beast incarnate wouldn't even show up to defend, or at least not booked to defend, but because he has limited dates on his contract. And Vince thought, like, okay, we'll still make you champion. And he'll complain today about the ratings, the ones he don't care about, that we have new superstars and nobody knows who they are. And Brock Lesnar's gone. We don't have Lesnar anymore. Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Thank you, Vince. At the same time, this week, the Undertaker himself had an interview with ESPN.com. And again, this is up and running too on their website. Cheap plug, I know. If you want to hear the interview in its entirety. But one of the focuses of this interview with the Undertaker, he was out of character, meaning he was conducting this interview as Mark Calloway, discussing his 30-year career in professional wrestling and now he was able to transition moving forward with his life with the use of social media and able to share a little bit more of his private life and family time with the world. Not exactly something easy that they can do, especially not overnight. And I'm sure it took a lot of thinking on part of the Undertaker. I don't believe he was convinced to do this by his wife. It's just something, hey, this is what everybody's doing kind of thing. At least that's what I believe. So when asked about basically getting onto the social media stuff and sharing with the world his home life, saying it's pretty difficult, honestly, but it was my idea. At the end, that the end is near, and he's discussing at this point his wrestling career, also the thought process that his career could have ended or should have, depending who you ask, much sooner between the loss to Brock Lesnar and then the loss to Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. He'll continue to say, I knew that I needed to document some of this stuff because I wouldn't have another way or another chance to do it. Because once I finally pull the plug, I won't have the opportunity to have footage of me behind the scenes and what I was thinking at the time. I really didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't start out with any thoughts. We just started filming this stuff with the thought of that somewhere down the line would maybe do something with it. Now, the second part of that statement there, or comments, he's referring to the upcoming Undertaker series. That'll be, I believe, 5-6 week series on the network. The first episode drops tomorrow night after Money in the Bank. And Mick Foley, I believe it was, oh goodness. Well, it was about their Hell in a Cell match at King of the Ring. And Foley would talk to Taker after the fact and bring up certain spots in the match. And if I remember this right, which is ironic considering what I'm about to discuss, but that the Undertaker, there were certain spots. Okay, now I'm confused now. It was Foley. Foley was the one that didn't remember a lot of spots during that King of the Ring match, especially the thumbtack spot. He was backstage and he was apologizing to, I think it was Gerald Briscoe. He apologized for not doing the thumbtack spot, and he was told, Mick, you did it. You did the spot. You're covered in the tax right now. But I think it was Undertaker. When did he say it? It was recent too. My God, and here goes my memory. It's all shot to shit right now. But there's a point in time where Taker basically said that his memory is not as good as it used to be. And the thought process there would be like, well, let's start recording. Let's start filming everything from now on that I do, in and out of the ring. And all of that turned into this upcoming mini documentary series based on The Undertaker, as himself, basically Mark Calloway, discussing his career, highlights, matches, turning points, other big decisions along the way. Right now, if you can't wait for a preview, there's about a 10 or 11 minute clip on all of WWE social media pages that you can watch. But personally, I'm going to wait to the full episode, which drops again tomorrow night after Money in the Bank. And should be interesting, and I hope it's at least an hour long. There's so much of The Undertaker to discuss in a 30-plus year career that if you're going to do a series or a season based on his career, you can't have your episodes 30, 45 minutes. They have to be at least an hour long. And it should be enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to it. Another big discussion this week was Roman Reigns was erased from the history books of the WWE. Okay, so here's what happened. This past week on Raw, they were showing the top 10 successful cash-ins with the Money in the Bank briefcase. And they dated back since its inception. What was that? WrestleMania 2000. So they didn't show all of them, obviously, because there've been more than 10 cash-ins. Some were unsuccessful. So by the time I got to number 1, it showed WrestleMania from was that 31 from the Valley, headlined by Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns the first time. But they didn't show Roman Reigns at all. And they heavily edited Roman Reigns out of the match. And they designed it as if Lesnar was dominating his opponent. Well, we don't know who it is because he was edited out. But here comes Seth Rollins at the time he had the briefcase. Runs in, attacks Lesnar, cashes in the briefcase, and then leaves as WWE champion. And nowhere to be seen is Roman Reigns. This should be no surprise, regardless of how and why Roman Reigns is not around right now, at least not on TV for WWE. But hopefully this is a lesson for recent fans of WWE. They have always rewrite their own history. As if old school fans like myself wouldn't realize, like, wait a minute, that's not how it happened. Especially when they show previous footage from past pay-per-views, such as upcoming Money in the Bank. They show previous footage of old Money in the Bank pay-per-views, of all of the exciting high spots, jumping off the ladder, others jumping through their opponents through a ladder, and so on and so forth. And what they will do nowadays when it comes to these video packages and hype packages, or whatever you want to call them, these compilation videos, that they will throw in shots of the crowd reaction. Like, oh, holy shit, oh my God. When in reality, the majority of these pay-per-view, specifically Money in the Bank pay-per-view events, the majority of the time, especially in the first few Money in the Bank pay-per-view events, there were never any cutaways to get the crowd reaction. And if you ever look at the original broadcast of any specific Money in the Bank pay-per-view, compared to the video package and compilation that they showed this past Monday, the footage would not match, meaning that there will never be a cutaway to a fan reaction, or there was a cutaway to a fan reaction and it's not the same one based on whatever footage of the specific match that they're showing at the time. I remember, a couple of years ago, Roman Reigns was booed out of the building on one episode of Raw. And then the following week, they had another video package based on Roman Reigns, and they edited it to make it look like as if Roman was being cheered, and that they showed this one guy sitting ringside. They cut to him during Roman Reigns' promo live, and he was seen booing Roman Reigns. And then later on the show, they cut to the same guy for some reason, and he's cheering on, I think it was the Usos were wrestling at the time. And he was just going apeshit. Like, he was so excited what the Usos were doing in the ring. So I guess they did that intentionally. Oh, this guy is now cheering, so get footage of him cheering, and we'll edit it together for next week's video package as if he's cheering on Roman Reigns and not the Usos or whomever it was at the time. Point being, this is not the first time they do something like this, where they intentionally edit somebody out. Obviously, they've done it before with a few other guys, to them that shall remain nameless. But if you don't see their matches in their entirety, you won't even know that Chris Benoit has been erased from WWE. Just like when you scroll through, say, what SummerSlam was that? The SummerSlam, was it '04? Where Benoit defended the world title against Randy Orton. If you scroll, if you scroll through the thumbnails to skip ahead and want to get to the main event instead, it will say something along the lines, World Heavyweight Championship match, or Randy Orton goes after the world title, or something like that. In other words, just another form and just another way to avoid mentioning Chris Benoit's name. The broadcast is still there. The original broadcast from Jim Ross and the King, that's still there in its entirety. So they will mention, without bleeping or editing out, the mention of Benoit's name. So it's just a visual and a text form of the man's identity is gone. That's not what WWE is doing here. Now many are speculating that this is their way of getting back at Roman Reigns for deciding not to compete in one of the main events for WrestleMania a few weeks ago. So this past Friday, Roman Reigns had a sit-down interview with TMZ Sports via video conference. At least the clip and the footage I saw, and it might have been longer, but the one I came across didn't cover or mention that, hey, did you know that WWE edited you out of a video package in the match that you were obviously in for the WWE title, and it was just a way to get Seth Rollins over, since he's challenging for the same title against Drew McIntyre tomorrow night? No, instead the conversation, at least from what I saw, was more about his decision and to clarify yet again why he didn't appear at, well, not just WrestleMania, but a couple episodes of SmackDown as well. So he says, and I quote, "We just had 2 newborn twin boys. They're 8 weeks old. So I had to make a decision for them. A lot of people, they think it was based off of my health and the history of my fight against leukemia. Talking to my doctors and stuff, I actually am fine. And my immune system is good. The drugs that I take to fight the leukemia, they don't attack your immune system. It's my family, it's my children. They are my legacy. No matter what I do in this world, my children are going to be the ones to represent my name and carry our name forward. So I had to make a decision for them to protect them being so young." He also mentioned that he doesn't know when he'll get back into the ring. He was not asked about being erased, quote unquote, from WWE history books this past Monday night on Raw. Even though, again, this happened on Friday. But it's virtually identical to the same reason he gave when it was announced, well, it wasn't announced. They didn't even make any mention as why Roman Reigns was out. Reigns was replaced, or no, I'm sorry, Goldberg was going to have a new opponent, a new challenger for the Universal title, and it ended up being Braun Strowman. And I kept pushing weeks leading up to that one particular go-home episode of SmackDown for WrestleMania that they had plenty of time to explain, and they never did. They just moved on as if Roman Reigns was never even in the picture. So this has been going on for quite some time. I mean, if you thought being erased from that video footage was one thing, they had not even being mentioned at all. And that's something else that apparently came out this week, along with the phrase non-title match. You can't mention that anymore. That's why there was so much confusion during the Street Profits and Viking Raiders match this past week on Raw. Now, usually I go with whatever graphic they show on screen, you know, the versus screen. At no point did I ever see WWE Raw Tag Team Championship match or whatever, something along those lines, Street Profits versus Viking Raiders. I did not see that at any point. I don't remember seeing that at any point. So by that logic, this is a non-title match. And looking back at the promos that were cut, at no point did I even hear that, oh, well, we'll put the titles on the line, or we'll challenge you for the titles. Nothing like that. But there was confusion regardless. But because the announcers never said at no point, oh, by the way, this match is not title, you have never known that. And come to find out, according to Dave Meltzer, good old Dave, you can't use the term anymore of non-title match. So many assumed that the Street Profits were going to defend the titles, and that wasn't the case. The gold wasn't on the line, or even though they're not gold, it's freaking silver or nickel or whatever, platinum. Even though the Viking Raiders had a pinfall victory over the Street Profits. And that's how it usually goes, even if it's just, oh, I challenge you to a match, but not the titles, but you beat the champions anyway. That should put you in line for a title shot. Well, excuse me, you can't say that anymore. So moving forward, we got to expect that the Viking Raiders are going to get a Raw Tag Team title match against the Street Profits somewhere along the line. And to add to more of the confusion, that it was believed, according to Dave Meltzer, that was believed that from Gorilla Position, Vince was telling the announcers, "Don't say that. Don't even mention. Don't even bring it up. That this is a non-title match." Well, I guess, and this is coming from me. I guess Vince wants us to learn how to speak WWE-ish or WWE's or whatever language he thinks he's going to want to end up calling of things we can and cannot say. Well, I guess we're too lazy to speak with using more intelligent words to help describe a narrative. Hell, this past week on AEW Dynamite, during the main event street fight, Jim Ross dropped the hospital word. He said hospital and not medical facility. So I wonder if Vince can still find him for that. No, he won't. But it's all in the name of entertainment, folks. And if you're a part of Vince's quote inner circle, and I'm not talking about Chris Jericho's faction, if you're not part of it or ever been in a meeting or spoken to anyone else that's part of it, you wouldn't even know what the hell is going on. You wouldn't even know how to act in front of certain people, especially Vince. We've all heard the stories by now. You can't sneeze in front of him. You can't eat in front of him. Like the certain behaviors that you're probably used to on a daily basis, you cannot do in front of this guy. More than likely thinking that, like, well, you're not focusing on the matter at hand, which is the business. So if you're going to sneeze, or if you're going to eat, or if you're going to breathe, go outside my office. And when you're done, you can come back. A few years ago, there was a whole list of terminologies that cannot be used anymore. You can add non-title match to that now. It's not a hospital; it's a medical facility. They're not wrestlers; they're superstars. It's funny how he still tries, among his other minions, can still try to shove that down our throats that it's not wrestling, it's not wrestlers. But are we forgetting that one of your W's in WWE stands for wrestling? Apparently he does. So yes, folks, I'm sure there would have been a lot of creative fans had we still had people able to attend these events in the arenas and hold up signs. Remember not to say this. Hopefully this is not a title match or more of a title opportunity. Yeah, that's something else they can't say. They can't say title match or championship match. It's a championship opportunity. An opportunity. I feel bad for any writer that's just starting with the company and may not be aware of certain terms and words they cannot use when it comes to the promos. And you got to script it out for the talents or the wrestlers. In other wrestling news, not WWE related, because I'm about to wrap this up here. MLW, or Major League Wrestling, they're still growing, and that's all great news for them. And they are now cut a deal with Fight TV to have their previous pay-per-views to stream on their network now. Fight, of course, for those who don't know, is a global digital platform for combat sports and special events, and will now feature MLW events from the past. I would assume that moving forward, there will be even newer episodes of MLW or even live events on Fight TV. But again, this is great news for them. It keeps them in the limelight, so to speak. Keeps them relevant. And a little schedule was also released after the announcement was made. So this past week, they debuted their first MLW on Fight TV. That was the Saturday Night Super Fight. And coming up on the 14th is MLW's Battle Riot 2 2019. In other wrestling news not related to WWE, MLW, Major League Wrestling, is keeping himself pretty much relevant and in a limelight. They cut a deal with Fight TV. For now, they're going to stream previous pay-per-views from MLW. And it began this past week on the 7th, airing Saturday Night Super Fight. And in the coming weeks, they're going to air MLW Battle Riot on the 14th, Battle Riot 2, that is, and on the 21st, MLW Opera Cup 2019. These shows mentioned will debut at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and additional replays will be available on demand. So if you haven't already, head over to Fight TV to subscribe. There's not a cheap plug for you. And join Fight TV. For those who don't know, it's a global digital platform for combat sports and special events that now includes MLW. So congratulations to MLW. Just one AEW news here. Tony Khan, he was a guest on this week's AEW Unrestricted, and he had a lot to say about AEW's run during the pandemic, while he and Vince McMahon are the only two sports heads right now running shows during the nation's massive lockdown. In the interview, Tony Khan was humble about the status of the upstart promotion of AEW, saying, "States were starting to shut down, and I never considered us or tried to force to be not try to be an essential business," so easy for me to say. "I never tried to stay open against restrictions. When we heard Florida and Georgia were going to shut down, we were shut down too, and we needed to tape as much content as we could before the shutdown." And this is true. For weeks, they would go on taping multiple shows at a time, and they've been airing in order ever since then. And somehow, this past week on AEW Dynamite was a live edition from Jacksonville, Florida. And that had the infamous now tag team street fight main event of Kenny Omega and Matt Hardy against the Inner Circle. Man, what chaotic moments backstage, to say the least. But say what you will about Tony Khan. Obviously, he's no Vince McMahon as far as, quote, global dominance with his wrestling company. I mean, it's still young. It's barely a year old. I would go far and say, sky's the limit for AEW. Who knows how far this will go as being a successful wrestling company and be one of the few alternatives to WWE. And I say one of the few because there are other places such as OVW, matter of fact. They're no longer allowed to have any shows in Kentucky. It was announced. At least I saw the statement made by OVW on their Facebook page, which I'll get into in a second. But the wrestling company is OVW. That is, they were the breeding grounds for names like Brock Lesnar, John Cena, Randy Orton, just to name a few. But management has worries. It may not have. It may have to, quote, tap out if OVW does not have a show anytime soon. The pandemic, unfortunately, has prevented any kind of income. The wrestling officials said that they have that they hope that the Kentucky governor will loosen up the restrictions to have shows really soon. If it doesn't happen, OVW could move to a different state. And one possible location one possible relocation, I should say, for OVW just might be in Destin, Florida. The statement that was put out on Facebook on their official page saying that we want to update our fans on where things stand. No decision has been finalized about leaving Kentucky, but we must return to action to survive, and that may mean a move. So basically, the longer this has gone, the worse has it's gotten for OVW. It's not like the old days. I mean, before NXT there was FCW, and before FCW there was OVW. So obviously they don't have the backers anymore or the support of the WWE. Those ties were cut a long time ago. So it's only a matter of time that we find out what's going to happen with the existence of Ohio Valley Wrestling. To be honest, if you're a fan like me, you don't want to hear, much less see, any of these wrestling companies go down because the state won't allow it to have any kind of shows, even if it's empty arenas or only a specific number of personnel are allowed backstage or whatnot, much less try to tape as many shows as possible and air them as they do locally. Well, here's to hoping that they figure out a solution real soon. And finally, ending on an interesting note here, and we've heard this before for the past, I would say at least the last 10 to 15 years. So after flirting with the idea of a presidential run under the Green Party, Jesse the Body Ventura has decided not to run in 2020. As many of you know, he's the former governor of Minnesota, former mayor as well, and has vouched their support for the Green Party in recent months. He stated that the current administration, let me rephrase that. He previously stated in the 2018 administration would not stand a chance if he ran. This was just a couple of years ago. He says, "Thank you to all my supporters." This will be on his Twitter account. "Yes, I have decided not to run at this time. I will still be voting green all the way, and I encourage anyone who's fed up with the two parties to do the same." In other words, Jesse Ventura is a neutral party. There were many previous discussions as to why and how come he's not running. Before he would indicate that he wouldn't have the proper number of votes to get kick-started in a potential run and begin a campaign. There were many years he was living off the grid. Matter of fact, I believe he had a TV show with a similar name, Off the Grid, and he had his conspiracy theory TV show which I found highly entertaining on certain subjects, although a lot of them were too close to home for a lot of people. But I personally, I don't know too much about his political ideas. It's not like he ever gave a full rundown of what he would do if he did win the election to be in the White House. Regardless what happens after November, there's going to be a huge mess that needs to be cleaned up. Whether it's the same guy or the new guy, there's going to be a lot to deal with moving forward until the next election in 2024. And it's one of the reasons why I don't get too political on my show. That's just by choice. But if it looks, sounds, and sounds and smells like it, then you're going to call it for what it is. And I'm referring to whomever's blatantly lied in front of cameras. But that's as far as I'll take it. So, King of the Ring, oh wow, I'm way off. Money in the Bank, oh my goodness, how in the hell did I confuse those shows? But Money in the Bank is tomorrow night. I made a little, had a little hiccup on my last show. This is episode 92, by the way. Should have mentioned that earlier. But apparently, both men and women's Money in the Bank ladder matches will happen simultaneously. At first, I was like, what? But apparently that's what they did. That's what they pre-taped over at the WWE HQ, Time Towers, whatever you want to call it. And SmackDown, they were, and I thought the timing and the way it was presented was a little funny. Even though they have halted the moving from one building to another. They bought this new multi-million-dollar building that's not too far from the current building, and may not get to move in, at least for the next, well, as of now, 5 months that they gave themselves to maybe, pick things up again. But what they did in the video package here is they showed all these empty cubicles, empty office spaces, empty lobbies, hallways and whatnot. Not too many office materials, but I'm sure that was done by design, or that they're already packed up and were getting ready to move before everything was shutting down. So I'm looking at this and thinking, wow, maybe not the gym, because that'll be a little bit difficult, but everything else that was shown, including on the roof where the ring is set up and they got the briefcases hanging over, I'll bet anything that the majority of what they're showing in those video packages will be destroyed. Whether it be tossed towards an opponent, slammed through by another opponent, or what have you. But more than likely, the majority of that equipment they showed and office supplies, or lack thereof, will be messed up before the night is over. So as it stands right now with the following. The men and women's Money in the Bank ladder matches will take place at the same time, beginning on the bottom floor of the lobby, I believe. Although, wouldn't surprise me if they end up in the parking lot, but that's even at a lower level, but we'll see. So it'll be Daniel Bryan, Aleister Black, Rey Mysterio, King Corbin, Otis, and AJ Styles representing the men's ladder match. And Shayna Baszler, Nia Jax, Asuka, Dana Brooke, Lacey Evans, and Carmella will represent the women's match, all happening at the same time. So that's about a dozen people running around destroying stuff left and right. I'm not making any predictions here. There are too many favorites on both sides, and I hate being wrong. For the WWE Championship, it will be Drew McIntyre defending against Seth Rollins. Technically speaking, this will be Seth Rollins' second title defense, if you don't count his immediate title defense right after WrestleMania went off the air, and he went one-on-one with the Big Show, mere minutes after defeating Brock Lesnar, allegedly. For the Universal title will be Bray Wyatt taking on Braun Strowman, the current champion. We'll see how much of the Black Sheep will influence Braun Strowman, or how exactly the Fiend will be introduced into the match. For the SmackDown Women's title is Bayley defending against Tamina. Tamina has a pinfall victory over Bayley, and yeah, I pretty much know what the outcome is going to be tomorrow night for this match. And the Fatal 4-Way tag team match for the SmackDown tag team titles. The champions, The New Day, will take on Miz and Morrison, the Forgotten Sons, and the Lucha House Party. R-Truth will take on MVP for reasons. And scheduled for the kickoff match will be Cesaro one-on-one with Jeff Hardy, which should be a very interesting physical match. So right now, that is your Money in the Bank 2020 pay-per-view lineup. 7 matches on the main card, only 1 on the kickoff. Even though, the irony, even though some of these matches are multi-person, in one case, men and women, not too many practicing of social distancing here, is it? But what do I know? They still get tested every time they enter a building. They check for symptoms, check for fevers, and they continue. So, hoping no one gets sick, hoping no one gets injured, even though they're pre-taped, or they have been pre-taped, these ladder matches can be unpredictable. Plus, being on the roof, let's see if they're going to pull one of those, Halloween Havoc, where Hogan and the Giant first had a monster truck sumo match. Don't ask. But yes, a monster truck sumo match on the roof of the arena, only for Hogan to somehow accidentally knock over the Giant off the roof and presumably plunging to his death. Only to come back half an hour later, no selling the fact that he just fell off the building and had his match with Hulk Hogan anyway. So by that logic, I'm hoping that no one is tempted to throw anyone else off the roof of Titan Towers. And if you haven't noticed the setup or the decorations, they put up a lot of trees on this roof. I guess that's to prevent, at the time, neighbors maybe catching a glimpse of what's going on, or see who could have climbed the ladder. I'm pretty sure someone had to try. One of the neighbors had to have tried to get a glimpse. Well, who knows? Maybe supposedly like WrestleMania that they recorded multiple alternate results or endings for certain matches. Maybe they've done the same thing here to avoid that. No one's put out any spoilers. And at this point, it's kind of redundant. If you do, it's less than 24 hours from now. But we shall see. I'll definitely do real-time results coverage on my social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can check out the links to those in the description down below. If you like what you heard, click that like button and ring that bell for notifications, and subscribe to the Good Old JM channel. So everyone, happy Mother's Day for those past, present, and future mothers. Let's enjoy each other's company for what we have now. Be safe, be good, be healthy, behave. Until next time.
I found the strength to open my eyes, leave it all behind. So open your mind.